now, please, wherever you are, make a big round of applause and help me in welcoming tonight's guest, Michael Anthony, who is coming all the way from, you're in Connecticut, I believe?
That's correct, yes.
I could tell by the cat tower that you are in Connecticut, the Connecticut cat tower. So thank you, Michael, so much for joining us on this. I'm super excited to talk with you about this. And there's a lot to get at. I figured maybe it would make the most sense for us to just sort of set up how you ended up being somebody that we would talk to about this. Again, you have a diverse background of things that you've done. We're talking to you about surviving death. And so how did you get into that?
Yes. Why in the world would we be talking about one of the deepest questions humankind has ever posed to a bartender?
Well, because who else are we going to ask?
Yes. The way that this happened was my dad passed away, and this is about 9 years ago. And my sister hired a medium, which is a person who claims that they can, hear our deceased loved ones in some way or sense them somehow. And I knew about that from the television show Crossing Over, which was on when I was in high school. And like The Ghost Whisperer was a television show. Yeah,
with presidential candidate John Edwards hosted.
Yes. 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 And the movie Ghost, with Whoopi Goldberg. That's what I knew of mediumship. I have before I went into theater, I was going to be a science teacher. So I've always been interested in science. And, current science says that it's not possible for a person who is no longer alive to communicate to someone who is alive, because current mainstream science says that everything is material, and that when you draw your last breath, all of the processes that go on inside of your brain that make you what you think of as you stop, and that is the end of your consciousness. And that's just what science says. So when I was watching these shows on television, especially Crossing Over, I thought, well, wow, it's really fascinating. These people seem very moved. Everyone's crying in the audience. And it seemed to me that these people believed he really was talking to their dead loved ones. But, that's a television show. So I'm assuming there's a whole lot of editing going on behind the scenes, so who knows what's actually happening. Anyway, my sister hires this medium, and I decided to test the medium, which meant that I came up with basically a code word that I wanted my dad, if this was real, I was like, Dad, if this is real, I want you to get this medium to say this very specific thing. And she came over to the house, and her name is Angelina Diana, by the way. She's based in Connecticut. And she did this 2-hour reading in our living room, and it was amazing. She was coming up with these very specific things that were not published anywhere. She could not have found on Facebook or Googled or, there was no way I could conceive of that she could have gotten this information in a quote unquote normal way. I was really blown away. And I had totally forgotten the code word because the night was so amazing. I totally forgot about it. And everyone in my family is crying. We're all weeping, just like the people on Crossing Over. I now understood. I was like, oh my God, this is really incredible. And if this woman was a con artist, right? And sure enough, I want to say up front that you have to be very careful. And there definitely are people out there who maybe are not as honest as they could be. And
that's you're not a Minnesotan, but that was such a Minnesotan way to say that. Like, there's just some people who, I'm not going to say that they're dishonest. It's just, maybe they could be a little bit more honest.
Right. Yes. Well, because before this happened to me, you're familiar, I'm sure, with Penn and Teller, the magicians Penn and Teller, and they had a show on Showtime. Are you allowed to say bad words on this show?
There might be children watching, but they have to learn at some point.
The title of the show was, BS. That was the title of their Showtime show. And he's an incredibly smart guy, Penn Jillette, like really brilliant guy. And he thinks that anyone who claims an ability like this is a horrible, evil person, because he believes there is no such thing as anything, quote unquote, paranormal. He is a materialist who believes that, your consciousness is confined to your brain and that when you die, you die. And watching his show, he does these incredible mind reading acts, which are just tricks, but they are amazing. And his whole point is, if I can do this and I have no paranormal ability, then anyone who practices can do these things. So that's where I was coming from when this happened. And he thinks anyone who does this is evil. That's not necessarily my view. I think maybe some people, they could convince themselves that they're being helpful in some way, and for sure, some of them are. What I'm interested in, though, is what's really happening. That's what my focus is on. So anyway, at the end of this evening, we're all crying. And if she was a con woman, if she had been just faking this, mission accomplished. Everyone in this room is in tears. They're all going to go out and talk about how they just had the most life-changing experience of their lives. And she was going to get 10 more marks out of this thing. Yeah. But instead, as she's wrapping up to leave, she looked right at me and said, he wants to talk about your hair. And hair, that was the code word. And I could not believe it because I hadn't said it out loud. It was only in my head to my dad. I hadn't even told my family about that. And right in that moment, I was like, it just totally changed the trajectory of my life. It was a paradigm shifting event. And then, I couldn't let that go. I had to figure out what was going on. How did she do that? So I called her about a year later and asked her if she would let me film her doing this with people that I brought to her. Mm-hmm. So I would know. There was absolutely no way that she could be Googling people or looking at their Facebook pages and at that point I was thinking, could it even be that she had hired like a private detective who had like some special audio listening device outside of my dad's house and heard me?
I should have told you, I do that for most of our guests.
I had a feeling, Tane. I had a feeling. So at that point, I was thinking, who knows what lengths people will go to if they're making a lot of money doing this stuff. So anyway, I asked her if she'd let me film her doing this with people that I brought to her, and she immediately said yes, she would. And so that's what I started to do. And I watched it happen over and over again, where she was coming up with information in a way that I still, to this day, cannot explain in normal ways. And that's sort of where it began for me. And then when I watched that happening, I was thinking, well, surely someone smarter than me should be looking into this stuff, right? Someone who is a scientist and knows how to conduct proper experiments with proper controls should be looking into this stuff. And I started to do some research and ended up discovering that research has been done at some of the finest institutions in the world, such as the University of Virginia, for instance, that has a whole division called the Division of Perceptual Studies that does these experiments in tightly controlled situations, and they have gotten positive results. And that was shocking to me that a university like the University of Virginia could have come to that conclusion, and it wasn't on the nightly news. Like why hasn't someone made that clear? Listen, people, it appears that there are some people who can talk to your dead loved ones somehow. I felt like that should be widely known.
Yeah. So that is a great, how we got here. And I'm curious now, do you have what is it that you believe right now, right? Can you articulate that? Because I can see where you get to, and then it's sort of okay, maybe there's all kinds of stuff I don't understand, but is there something now that you can say, okay, this is what I think is happening or is true?
Well, yeah, that's obviously a big question, because what is ultimately happening is way beyond my ability to comprehend. But what I can say is, from the evidence that I've personally seen and from the general research, it appears to me that consciousness exists after the brain is no longer functioning. And I think that can be clearly said. Because it's not just mediumship. That's where I started on this path. But then it quickly branched out into other areas of research, some of which the evidence is so starkly clear that, for instance, you might have heard about little kids who sometimes spontaneously recall previous lives. Are you familiar with that phenomenon?
I mean, I don't talk to a lot of little children but when I do, they bring this up all the time. It's actually quite annoying.
Yeah, it's this real phenomenon that little kids sometimes spontaneously have these memories that they claim is from a previous life. So where it starts to get interesting, though, is when they have enough details where we can identify who that previous life is. So, for instance, they'll say, my name was John. I was a fighter pilot in World War II. I flew off of an aircraft carrier called the Natoma Bay. This is like a 3-year-old kid. I flew off the Natoma Bay. My friend was John Larson. He flew with me, John Larson. This is a real story by a kid named James Leininger and his dad.
I mean, I'm pretty sure, wasn't there a whole episode of Arthur that was set in World War II on the Potomac Bay where, the aardvark and his friends were just, fighting the Japanese?
Maybe. I'm not familiar with that one. It's possible. But in this particular case, there's a great book called Soul Survivor that's written by his dad that's all about this, because his dad was a very devoutly religious man, a Catholic man, and he had no room in his belief system for reincarnation. So he had to prove that this wasn't real. He had to prove it to himself that what was happening wasn't real. And he ends up going on this incredible journey that was researched at the University of Virginia very, very deeply. And the number of things that were proven to be true later on, that this little kid said so many different things, including names and places and everything. And sure enough, when they figured out who this guy was, James Houston was the man who really died in World War II. Everything about everything about that guy's life, this little kid had talked about. So anyway, there are tons of cases like this. The University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies, now has like 3,000 cases. And in a very large number of them, they are called solved cases, where the little kid is given enough information where they can go back and find this person. And in the most amazing of cases, there will be like a birthmark on the kid somewhere that corresponds to how that person died. So they'll have like a birthmark, say, this is often someone who dies from a gunshot, say. They'll have a wound on where the bullet went in, which is typically a smaller wound. And then they'll have a birthmark on the back, which is typically more irregular. And when someone gets shot, that's how it happens. The entrance wound is smaller, and usually if there's an exit wound, it's bigger and more irregular. So a little kid will give all of these details. They'll end up finding this previous person. And in the best cases, we have autopsy photos. We have the full medical report. And the location of the birthmarks, for instance, will exactly match the body and the autopsy report. And like I said, there are thousands of these cases that have been solved in this way. So,
okay, this was going to be a later question, but I'm going to ask you now. Yeah. So do you find this all comforting?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I find it, it's hard to wrap our brains around, right? Like what could this mean? If this is true that we come, it's also not, we can't definitely say that just because these kids are having these memories that they lived those lives. Maybe the brain acts as a receiver in some way, right? Maybe consciousness, what I believe now is that consciousness is not confined to the brain. The brain does not create consciousness in my mind. The mainstream view says that the brain does.
Well, and maybe it would be helpful just to try, and I know that we're saying that this is very difficult to do, but define what we even mean by, or you are talking about in terms of consciousness, right? Like, because again, I think that some people might hear this and be like, oh, I'm thinking of this in terms of like a soul or a spirit and then I hear consciousness and I'm like, if I drink enough of these, I'm going to alter my consciousness anyway. So which consciousness is it that goes with me beyond something?
Yeah.
How do you define, when you say consciousness, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay away from religious. Like some words immediately have a lot attached to them for people. Words like soul, for instance. But yes, that's what I mean. If you want to use the word soul or spirit, it's the thing that is you, the thing that is mostly you. Maybe after a couple of beers, right? Because that's when we're mostly, I guess, truly our real tame dangers is after a couple of beers. So yeah, the soul, I guess if we wanted to use a sort of a widely known word, yeah, the soul, whatever it is that is you. Because in a lot of this research, it seems that it's not just the person's awareness that goes on after their body dies. Their personality is intact, stays intact. You know, it's not like it's just the whole accumulation of their experiences. It's who they were as a person. A lot of times these mediums, you know, they get the feeling of the personality of the person. Yeah. So I just wanted to say one other thing about research that is very difficult to explain away. Near-death experiences is another one, right? Which is now a popular term. People,
or they were going to say a popular thing. No,
popular term. It's becoming more and more of a thing that happens, though, because we're getting better and better at resuscitating people, right? It used to be if a person went into cardiac arrest, chances were that person was not going to survive because we just didn't have the equipment. Now, every restaurant, I had to use one myself at the theater at Hamilton once. A man, his heart stopped, and so it happens pretty frequently now that people they have their heart stop and they come back, they're resuscitated. But again, in the best of those cases, right, you've probably heard the stories where a person dies and they feel like they come out of their body and then they see a tunnel and maybe they talk to their dead grandmother and then they get to a gate or something and then they're told that they have to go back. It's not their time yet, right? That's sort of a classic near-death story. But in the best cases, they're known as veridical near-death experiences, where someone, let's say, is on the operating room table and they're under general anesthesia, which should mean that there's no chance of them having any awareness whatsoever. General anesthesia totally shuts off the brain. There should be no ability for them to have any thoughts or any conscious experience of any kind. But they go into cardiac arrest and they're dead. And we know that they're dead because they're hooked up to all of this equipment, monitoring equipment. So they have no heart activity. There's no brain activity, right? These things are totally shut down. And we know it for sure because they're hooked up to very, very sensitive instruments. And during that time, the person claims that they come out of their body, but then they see things that are happening in the room. And then let's say maybe they go down the hallway and they go to the visiting room where their family is waiting and they overhear a very particular conversation that was going on down the hall while they were dead on the operating room table. Okay?
Mike, help me out here. Because I get it. Like, so I at some point I want to like quibble with like maybe other elements of this, but right now I'm going to just take it for this is all true and right. And I feel like a lot of people have heard you say like, this is comforting. This is nice to think like, oh, life goes on. I find this terrifying and like, just what? Like, I'm going to die. Like right now I'm like, I will die someday and like, go back into the earth and just sort of dissolve. And that's fine. Now I have to think about like, what am I going to do? Like when I'm dead, I'm going to have to go and eavesdrop on people or like visit them.
Well,
exhausting.
Maybe this will put you somewhat at ease. I do understand that. I get it. But by and large, 99% of these cases, and as I said, there are now many thousands of cases where people have had these experiences. In the very vast majority of them, close to 100%, they come back having had this transformational experience that is so profound and so uplifting. It totally changes their lives. In fact, that's one of the reasons that even sort of mainstream scientists, psychiatrists will look at this, the effect that it has on the person, whether or not there is an objective reality to it, right? Let's just put that aside. Even if it is somehow generated by the brain and somehow something happens in the brain that suddenly makes you be able to go down the hall and hear something that's definitely happening. the effect on the people is long lasting and usually permanent. So a guy who's 30 years old dies, has a profound near-death experience. He's changed often for the rest of his life, because they'll go back and ask the person 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years, you know, how they're feeling now about that experience. And it's often described as more real than real. I've often heard it put like this, you know, when you're in a dream and it feels like you're really there, right? When you're having the dream, that is reality. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, of course that was not, obviously I was not Superman flying around buildings, even though I so believed I was just a minute ago. Obviously this is reality. When someone has a near-death experience, it's often described in that way. It's like, this is the dream that you and I are in right now. And when they die and come out of their body, they suddenly feel like, oh my God. And it's a relief to them that this is almost like a nightmare compared to
God, now I feel terrible about, now where am I right now? I'm in a nightmare.
Well, compared, relatively speaking, a nightmare. Just meaning that they have these feelings that they often, almost all of them also say, listen, I can't put this into words. The feeling was so profound, there's no way for me to really describe it. But they'll say the clearest thing I can say is that it was like this feeling of all encompassing love, you know, as a sort of,
nice.
You know, as cheesy as that might sound. That's what they say. It's this feeling of overwhelming comfort and peace and acceptance and love. And they all come back. Most of these people, you know, we also interview the people who are connected to this person, you know, the people in their lives. And so many of these people say, this guy, I can't believe I married the guy he was before this, because that guy was kind of a jerk. And this guy, you know, it like really changes people. They tend to come back and be much more careful about how they are with other people in their lives. And they're also much more hopeful. And to a person, almost to a person, they have no fear of death anymore, which is one of the things that, you know, I was just recently watching the show, The Good Place, you know, on Netflix. And the lead character at one point is trying to tell Michael, you know, this immortal being, what it's like to be a person, a human. And she says that, you know, all people are aware of death. So we're all a little bit sad all the time. And there's a truth to that, right? For a lot of people, it's like something that's always there in the background. We do whatever we can to like not think about it mostly, but it's there in the background. And what I have come to believe is true, it sort of mitigates that sadness a little bit. Like I do not think of it in the same way anymore. For me personally, from what I've seen and experienced myself now, I personally have no doubt that death is not the end of our existence. There is something else, and it feels like it's something good from the vast majority of the people who claim to have been there. You know, and
okay.
Can I just say one other thing about
yes.
experiences for skeptics? That's really hard to explain away. We've had a lot of people who are completely blind. In some cases, blind from birth. Okay, in some cases, the ocular nerve is not even connected. They were born with the nerves not even connected. So there's no way a visual signal could get from the eye to the brain. There's no way. They die, they go into cardiac arrest, they come out of their body, and they have a fully visual experience. They see. And for these people, it's really odd because they've never seen in this life. So they for some of them, it's actually a little disorienting and a little scary at first because they're having this brand new experience. You know, like one woman said that suddenly she didn't have to touch a chair to know that it was there. That's what she described sight as, a person who'd never seen. She was born without her nerves connected. When she came out of her body, she saw a thing. She knew it was a chair because of the way, you know, she'd felt it, the shape of it before. But now she could know the chair was there without being next to it. And that's how she described sight. There's a whole book written about this. It's called Mind Sight. And it goes over, you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of cases. How do you explain that away? I just don't, that bit of evidence alone makes me think that there really is something going on here that we don't yet understand.
Afterlife.
Yeah. Well, again, that's hard to say. From people that have gone deeply into, for instance, so you have a near-death experience, right, where you've died and then you have this experience. There are other ways that people claim that you can get there by undergoing hypnosis, which is a very difficult topic, academically speaking, because it brings in all sorts of problems. So this is not about science. This is purely about people's experience. I just want to say that up front. But people can have a past life regression, right? And there is a particular branch of this. So this is where you get hypnotized and suddenly you remember you were a soldier in the Civil War, right? Or whatever. And there's a particular branch of this therapy where they try to take people to the place where they supposedly go between lives. It's called LBL, life between lives. And in this place, when under hypnosis, people have very profound experiences where they say they are fully experiencing what this other realm is like. I won't get too much into it because I'm not an expert, but there's a guy named Dr. Michael Newton who sort of did a lot of this research, and his book, Journey of Souls, I believe, is the book to read on that subject. That's one that I personally found very comforting. It's a fascinating book. And, on that note, I had a friend of mine who is not at all into this stuff whatsoever. I wanted to see what it would be like to have someone that I know have a past life regression. And she had this experience, and we filmed the whole thing. And she had a life-changing experience under hypnosis. She recalled having these two previous lives. And then she went to this place supposedly between lives where she did meet with a deceased grandmother of hers. She could suddenly smell her, and she burst into tears. It was incredibly powerful to witness. And it changed, I would say it changed Marie's life. It was a very profound experience. So, I have never had a personal experience of my own. So I can only say what I've heard about what the afterlife is like. And, all evidence seems to point to the idea that it's a place that's full of love. Again, I know that sounds can sound a little silly, I guess, but that's the overwhelming feeling that people talk about when they have this direct experience.
So there is a piece that you mentioned in there about the experience of it, and that experience has an impact. And for a lot of people, yourself and the folks you were just talking about, it's a very positive impact. Mm. If that's true, does it matter if it's real or not?
Right. That's a great question. It depends. For people who have these past life regressions, for instance, I would say, no, it doesn't matter. If it makes your life better here, now, today, then that's what matters, right? For people who are in deep grief, having lost someone, because there are studies now where they're looking at the use of mediumship as a part of grief therapy, right? Because in the traditional grief therapy, it's all about acceptance. It's about accepting the loss and moving forward with your life. There's a place called the Windbridge Institute in Arizona where they study mediums doing triple blind experiments, which is just tightly controlled experiments. And they've come to the conclusion that mediumship is a real thing. And now what they're looking at is using mediumship in grief therapy. And the results are pretty powerful, that it can really move people forward through their grieving process in a way that could take a lot longer in traditional sort of psychotherapy, talk therapy ways. So yeah, in that sense, the objective reality of it in those cases doesn't matter. If it's changing people's lives for the better, it's changing people's lives for the better. And in that case, that's what matters.
Other questions we got online. One of them is, Are there commonalities of near-death experiences?
Yes, yes. So this is what's really fascinating. Dr. Raymond Moody is the guy who in 1975 wrote the book called Life After Life. And he was a physician, and he started doing this research, and that's what astounded him. It's not that people were having experiences necessarily when science says they shouldn't be able to. It's that there were these commonalities in these experiences.